On tonight's program, we talk about strategies to cope with Foundry downtime. And my thing always with Foundry downtime is it's a great time to write. It's a great time to sit down and write a script for a mission you've got coming. We revisit our discussion on controversial topics, but as you're writing that, you can't know what's going to affect your audience. And we talk about recurring characters.
Yeah, I think it's great. You do have to be careful to do it in such a way that you don't bank on the player knowing who the character is.
Join us on the Foundry Roundtable. Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively dedicated to the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your Tame Foundry author, Drogon1701. Joining me are the three Musketeers, Sir Green the Dragoon.
Yay!
Sir Mark the Hawkman.
Hey.
And Sir John the Hippie.
Hello.
And, yes, it has happened. The Foundry is down. This course is completely routine, and, barring any kind of problem, I'm betting this one goes really smooth. And, because it's assets and bug fixes, there's no new systems per se.
There are already missions that have been
republished.
Yes,
we record this Wednesday night, we already noticed that some missions have been republished, so it's going through the process. My only wonder actually is there's some pathing fixes to some of the maps, including that Argelius trading station.
Yes.
I'm wondering what that will do to existing missions, and hopefully it won't screw anything up.
It shouldn't screw anything up.
Yeah.
It should fix things, but you don't know, right?
Well, no, I mean, what was happening was no pathing was getting assigned, so your boss would get stuck and everything, even in live.
Yeah. Mm.
And so now they put that in, and once it publishes, it will calculate the pathing correctly.
So yeah.
Excellent.
Yep.
And Dragoon, tell us about the Foundry waiting system.
Yes. So with this update, now Zero kind of keyed us in on this like months ago, but it's been a while. Basically, it used to be that the top rated list was sorted by average rating regardless. So, for instance, if you published a mission, got 5 of your friends to 5-star it would immediately jump to the top of the list. Now, what this weighting system does is basically it takes how many plays or reviews you have and uses that as a factor. So, the more plays you have, it'll shift your position on the top rated list higher. So missions that have thousands of plays will show up higher than a mission that only has a few plays. Now, I think she did say that the weighting starts to fall off past 100. It's really just designed to like new missions from shooting up to the top artificially.
Sounds good. And as I was telling you when we were talking before the show, that I did remember that, but it had been months ago, and I had thought that was already implemented. But I guess I was wrong.
Yeah. How long we've been waiting for this update.
Yeah, no kidding. So of course, Foundry downtime brings us to what I think our first topic, which is what to do during Foundry downtime. Some of us have gone through this before. Some out there have not. And my thing always with Foundry downtime is it's a great time to write. It's a great time to sit down and write a script for a mission you've got coming up, or write a couple of scenes. It's good time to take a break and outline, do all the things the prep work that you're going to need to do, things that you do outside of building maps. Of course, there's also, especially right now, playing the game itself, because of course there's all kinds of new Legacy of Romulus stuff live.
I was going to say, most Foundry downtimes don't include an entire new faction to play.
This is true.
Yeah.
It's a unique situation. Have you guys been on and playing?
I'm on and playing right now.
Yeah, I remember the Season 4 downtime. The only new stuff to play for that was the Breen Invasion mission.
I don't think I logged on during the Season 4 downtime. I was sitting in my chair with my laptop I wrote an entire mission in the Season 4 downtime, and I don't think I logged on once.
Wow.
It's
I need
a
to
good
be writing
mission.
dialogue.
I think it's one of my favorite
but
missions.
Romulans are happening too.
It's very tempting. I know I was on for quite a long time last night, till about 1 a.m.
Shards goes down in 10 minutes.
Yeah, we should say that as we're recording, they're preparing to take the whole game down to do some emergency maintenance. This is the second or third emergency maintenance that they've had to do.
I have personally been really happy with how much they're just keeping an eye on what's going on, and they seem to really be taking care of the game, making sure that things are working, and like the notices on top of the forums, and they're making sure people know what's going on. So I'm really liking the way they're treating this.
Doesn't insulate them from complaints.
No, of course not, because
forums explode as they always do.
I'm ready to declare Bramflakes inhuman. I literally measured this, and he got exactly 4 hours of sleep last night between his last post in the evening and his following post the following
in the morning.
Well, Dan Stahl was up until 2 in the morning talking to people on the Red Alert channel sporadically.
Really? Did he say anything good?
Really?
Nothing
Really?
particularly interesting, but, you know, he was there talking to people about the Legacy of Romulus release.
Yeah, he's done a couple of QAs.
And also he was explaining the reason why they brought the server down at 2 in the morning for another emergency.
I mean, like, just
it's pretty
having him...
self-explanatory. It's just we need to work on this because there's an issue.
Yeah, I know. Like, okay, we know you're having issues with this, that, and the other, so we've figured out something that we think will probably help, so we're going to reboot the server again.
Mm-hmm. They posted the notes here for this one, which is made improvements for general stability, resolved an issue that prevent liberated Borg Romulans from spending skill points once they choose an ally, which is good, because I know some people who are having that issue.
I had read about that issue. I hadn't.
I had not experienced it because my Borg liberated Romulan is only about level 5. So hopefully that will fix it.
Well, my only Romulan Republic character on live is around level, like, somewhere around 7 or 9, somewhere in there. Not high enough to choose an ally yet.
I got one to 12. That's my highest.
I started a liberated Borg Romulan, but then discovered how to get my Riemann unlocked, and so now I've got a Riemann going that I'm really liking.
Yeah, we were talking about the Riemann options. I think they got some cool looking stuff.
They do.
I think they do too. I just, like you, I just started a Riemann, so.
My only problem is the skin tones seem wrong compared to the movie.
They don't have enough ashy or gray skin tone.
I was going to say, they didn't have any skin tone in the movie.
It's pretty
albino.
Gray. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a minor quibble, to my mind. So I should ask, how has the launch itself gone for you guys? I mean, I know lots of people are reporting problems, which is great. If you have a problem, you should report it. I mean, otherwise it's never going to get fixed. You can guarantee that. So,
right.
But I myself have had a very smooth launch. I was able to play for a long time last night, and other than a little bit of inventory lag and some lag in turning in a quest, I really didn't have any issues.
Yeah, the monster lag was the only big issue I saw yesterday.
And that's fairly predictable with the amount of people that were trying to log on at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
I was actually expecting to get disconnected at random far more. Actually, I didn't get disconnected at random at all yesterday.
No, nor did I. Which I was expecting, actually.
Yeah, I've not encountered any random disconnects. For as much as I see people yelling about, I'm a lifer, excuse me, I'm a lifer, I'm a gold, and I should be farther up in the line. All I've seen is that, I'm further ahead in the line than I would imagine to be whenever I try to log on.
Yeah, I think I'm a lifer, and I was pretty sure that I was further ahead in the line than a lot of people.
It gives you a higher priority in the login queue. It doesn't necessarily put you in front of everyone else.
Yeah, and it doesn't put you ahead of any of the other golds that logged on before you. So
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Of which there are a lot logging on.
And there are probably a lot of lapsed lifetimers too. That haven't played the game in forever because they were bored at whatever point they stopped playing, and now they're like, hey, let's go check out the new thing. So.
Absolutely.
No, the queue has actually been really fascinating to watch because, I mean, just thinking that that the server can handle so many people at a given time, And then
Mhm.
beyond that, we had up to 15,000 people waiting to get in.
No, at least
I mean,
that.
that's huge.
Never heard that number before, but it doesn't surprise me.
Well,
Yeah.
I've seen that number and up to like 20,000 bandied around on the forums. I have no idea if it's accurate.
Could be.
That
I
would
mean,
be,
And I have no
Based
idea
on-
if the Q numbers really mean what we think they mean.
yeah.
Exactly.
they seem to be moving pretty accurately, from what I can
Well,
tell.
well, one thing to remember about the Q numbers is that we see that giant number, but we don't have the throughput statistic. Like, how many people actually log in per second, versus how many are currently waiting in the queue to log in.
Right.
Well, is the queue representative of throughput, or is it representative of total capacity?
That's another question that I don't know.
And does someone have to log off before it lets the next person in the queue in?
See, that's kind of what I'm wondering.
Or is it just a gated entry? You know, so many per second or whatever.
Well, the way I understand the way instancing works in this game, instances don't necessarily require all of the previous instances to be full. So it's possible that the logging queue works in a similar way. Then
I
again, I don't
assume,
really know the
in
specifics.
theory, that there is a maximum number of people that the server farm can support at any given
Yeah.
time.
That's what I would think.
Only got finite resources.
Right, but I suspect that it's probably a flexible upper limit that they're working with, but I don't know exactly.
Oh, it is, but there's still, I mean, at some point, you've run out of servers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, I mean, as far as what's been described, Champions, Stowe, and Neverwinter, while they share a couple of servers, like the chat server, for the most part, they are all
Login
completely
server,
separate.
I think, is
Login and chat. But yeah, everything else is
Yeah,
separated.
that's what I've heard.
So,
So, I mean, that's how they can take Stowe down without taking Neverwinter down, right?
yeah.
Right.
Of course, if they turn off the chat server, well, you know.
Well, yeah, then everybody's
Getting
bored.
quiet, all of
All right, well, seems like we're all having a good time at the moment with our game. So why don't we move on to what we've been working on? Green Dragoon, let's start with you.
Well, this weekend was the big prepare for the launch weekend. And it actually involved me going back into part 1 and making some fixes and some corrections. The big one was that my, in my mission where you, are doing all that research on the alien probe, and the final step of which is to scan the probe again.
That was part of the mission I quite liked, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the trick of it is that you're scanning it through the force field, and unfortunately, you can no longer interact with NPCs through a force field or through a solid object. And so I needed to rejigger that. There was a couple of other tricks I had used with that, because what you're interacting with was actually the section of crate underneath. And since you can no longer interact with solid, I basically put a subfloor in and set this crate NPC on that, so only the top was sticking through, and then put the what I called the probe, but was really a detail object on top of that. Well, unfortunately, because you can no longer interact through the floor, the NPC crate was no longer interactable.
That's definitely something that people are going to have to go look through their missions and see, you know, am I interacting with things through solid objects, and is that now broken?
Well, Cryptic Frost made an interesting comment on his I'm Back thread, where he said it was a known issue, so that it may not be intentional behavior.
Huh.
Which is kind of strange, because it seems like something they might put in as intentional, just to clean things up, but
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe they didn't mean for to cut off interaction through solid objects.
Certainly possible.
Then again, he may not
So
know whether it's real bug or not.
hopefully that'll get a fix at some point, if that's indeed the case.
But either way, I mean, I was able to rework that. I did confirm that what was it? I was talking about, we were kind of musing on the broken force field. I had mentioned that its interaction is a little strange because its collision is somewhat one-sided.
Yes, I saw your post on that.
Yeah, so
That was
basically,
cool.
depending on which way it's turned around, you can either interact through it or you can't, which makes it very useful, actually. So I was able to use that.
So Dragoon, I think you just brought up something that, we started with talking about what to do with the downtime, and we didn't even cover any Foundry news, of course, because it feels like there's probably not any Foundry news this week. It's the launch of Legacy of Romulus, but the thread that you just referenced, why don't you talk about the forum thread that you just referenced? Because I think that's a piece of Foundry news, actually, that, our QA guy is asking for direct input from the community. So
yeah, so this all started when Cryptic Fosk started a thread basically saying I'm back, and he'd kind of been
he'd been off working on Legacy of Romulus.
Yeah, he'd been out of it doing QA changes for Legacy of Romulus, and had posted this thread to let us know that he was back looking at Foundry changes. And this has kind of sparked a few things, one of which is basically he asked for input on missing costumes. And so we actually started another thread on this, basically asking people to start listing on all of the costumes, ships, and or NPC, or not NPC, but basically customizable.
Yeah, all the uniforms and the ships and that sort of thing. And
yeah,
people have definitely stepped up and gone through the C-store, looked at what we don't have, and he's been updating his list. And it's quite a list, but we maybe we hope that this is sort of the first step towards getting some of these things in, is a comprehensive list that he can give to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, and if any Foundry authors want to check it out, it's titled "What Costumes Are Missing in the Foundry Bugs Forum." Cryptic Fosk is kind of proceeded under the assumption that these items were missing and they should be in there. Bless his heart.
For me, it's just
that's what we think, right?
Yeah, for me, it's just having someone at Cryptic, taking the initiative and saying, what things do you guys, see that you need in there? Let's make this list. Seeing them taking the initiative is just a really positive feeling.
And just looking at this thread, I mean, he's already got quite a few in there. I would say he's probably got at least a couple dozen ships and probably about 24 uniforms.
Yeah, it's things like the Vesta and the Andorian Kumari ships and the all those little skin variants like the Venture, the updated Galaxy, and the Exeter, the updated Constitution, things like that.
Isn't one of the old Bajoran costumes not in there? Like the Bajoran Vedette costume?
None of the Bajoran uniforms are in. We have access to none of those.
They made it into this list, though.
Yeah, that's why they're on the list.
But yeah, I mean,
at some point, I never saw this personally, but I've heard tell that at some point the Bajoran Vedix robes made it into the Foundry by mistake and then were removed.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those cases where
that happens.
That was kind of like with the Vesta, because someone reported that they were able to use the Vesta in the Foundry before it was released on live purchased in the C-store.
It had no textures though. It was just, it was the model, but it was completely black. It was quite so obviously that was a mistake.
That was one of those ships that basically the Foundry was the source of leaking that those ships were coming early. Along with like the wells.
Yeah,
the showed up in the Foundry and then got
they eventually, of course, put the wells back in, which is nice of them.
Well, I actually did use the Aeon time ship in one of my missions, although I recolored it to look different.
Yeah, I like using it as an alien ship. It makes a good, alien ship. You just put a different color on it.
They look quite weird.
Now, a couple of these are
worker bees with the stealth fighter texture on it look really cool too.
A couple of these are ones that I loaded into my template mission, which I made this weekend.
Cool.
I also did that, talking about preparing for Legacy of Romulus. Of course, we are told in several places that they are trying to bring that costume import back for us, but there are bugs that they need to fix.
But at the same time, a lot of the stuff, if they do bring it back, it'll be after they fixed it, and we can't break it and get access to all of those extra options.
I'm not sure exactly what
here's
to fix it. That's the thing. My looking at this thing and wondering what they're going to tinker with it in order to make it into that it isn't currently. I can think of two ways that they're going to go with that. One of them is to more or less sync it up with the way costumes work on live so that you don't get invalid sets of things. But the other one that goes through my head is that what they're doing to fix the import costumes thing is to add to it all of the possible costumes that it doesn't have already. I mean, because
That would be nice.
well, one thing I noticed
So it
a
wouldn't
while
have to try
back when
and
I was
find-
tinkering with the import costume thing is that I took all of my characters on the live server, all 9 of them, saved their character costumes, and then attempted to import them into the Foundry, and discovered that half of them didn't come in right. I mean,
Yeah,
a
because
lot
they're not
of
on the
them
Foundry.
would end up with pieces of their costume missing and getting replaced by random default items. And I mean, I hope that that's what they're taking it down to fix, because I mean, I can easily understand why having the feature work like that would cause problems, both for people using it and for server side.
And I imagine they're also going to look at the ways in which it was crashing the Foundry.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, Drogon, did you happen to load the invisible NPC into your?
In my template mission, no, but it does exist in another mission.
Yeah. Because I mean, that one's the Foundry crasher right there.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there were others as well, but that the invisible NPC was definitely, and I'm sure they don't want, and I can understand them not wanting to leave in a feature that crashes things,
absolutely.
because that's really not a good policy.
So,
but it certainly was something that was very, very useful for us, despite crashes, and as Cryptic Frost was fond of saying, it's a use at your own risk feature.
Yeah.
right. So for me, I don't have a problem with the fact that it's gone. And the reason I think I don't have a problem with it is the way that they handled getting rid of it. Yeah, it took someone saying, I think it might have even been you, Dragoon, who asked on the forums, that we wanted the direct answer. Is this ever going to come back, et cetera, et cetera? But at least we got that answer. So we knew going into this update that it was going to go away. So we had the time to make those, missions that have every costume that we could possibly want in it. And
yeah.
Well, in my
Drogon,
case,
though,
I
that was
already
you,
have
though,
all
wasn't
of the good costumes in one mission already, so I didn't really need to do much of anything with it. Granted, of course, my definition of good costumes is things that I needed to use the costume import feature for, not simply things that the costume import feature made quicker and easier.
Well,
Gotcha.
the reason I put a little template mission together was because I absolutely love using recurring characters, which is a topic I was planning to bring up later on. But I love using it, and I love putting characters in all of my missions, even minor characters that you might not even notice, and putting other people's characters in my missions, as you well know, John.
Yeah.
because of course, because you deleted a character, now the only place your little space pirate crew exists is in my mission.
That's entirely true.
Because you gave me the costumes and I put them in there. And so,
all
of
those
course,
boss, that character, they're gone because I wasn't playing the tune anymore, so I got rid of it.
Mm-hmm. So one of these days, I need to write some dialogue for them, just fun stuff to overhear. Once we get it back up, maybe I'll do that.
Something about being stranded by their captain.
There you go. The captain's gone away and left the crew stranded.
That jerk.
Perhaps you would like to use my character of oh wait, I forgot what I called the character. But oh well. Endless.
Actually,
Well, back to what we've been working on. Mark, were you working on anything leading up to the Foundry downtime?
not in the sense of actually, working on things in Foundry. It's more a matter of, I guess you could say, thinking about what I want to do. Like, one of my missions that I built bedside, granted, I never actually finished it. I did part 1, and then part 2 I started working on, but not much. Anyways, one of the things I was thinking about doing was making a copy of that and rewriting the copy to be something that works better from a Romulan standpoint. Why? Well, the original mission was a Federation group going to help Romulans that lived in the past. So, you have Feds going into the past to stop Klingons from attacking Romulans in the past. And what I was thinking about doing was rewriting that so that it would make more sense from a Romulan standpoint. Since, well, let's face it, Romulans in the past, seeing Feds, okay, simple, easily predictable response, blah, blah, blah. We don't trust you. Why are you here? Yada, yada, yada. But seeing other Romulans from the future, I kind of think that would be a not just a little bit different, but a whole lot different. So, yeah.
It'd be interesting to see those differences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Between the Romulans of our Republic and the Romulans of the shows.
Well,
back in the past.
The funny thing, though, is that I'm using our original series era Romulans, so this predates the Tal Shiar's takeover of the Empire. This isn't the old Empire. This is the old Empire from like 150 years ago.
Gotcha.
So that adds to something else to think about, I guess you could say.
Well, I know that you would benefit greatly from the Romulan original series costumes being put in the Foundry.
Oh, yeah.
There's ways you can get close to it. I know because I built some for a KDF side mission.
I posted a few pictures on the forums a while back showing the costumes I created for this mission,
Mm-hmm.
which they're a reasonable approximation of original series era Romulan uniforms. They're not exact, but
I remember that because that's what I based the ones that I built off of, was your screenshots.
Uh-huh.
Ah.
You can get close, but obviously we'd love to have the actual ones in there.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with the little helmet.
Oh, yeah.
That's definitely something that I've been doing as well, as I've said previously, is taking a mission that I had built, or, started building, made some progress on, and turning it into a Romulan mission.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not actually what I was going to talk about with what I've been working on, because I've been actually in the Foundry building on my mission, the mission introducing Major Recall that I've been talking about, because after brainstorming with you guys and after figuring out finally how to actually outline the thing and what maps I was going to need, I was able to get in the Foundry last weekend and put down all the maps I need.
Right
which
on.
is definitely a significant step. Because then I can start adding NPCs, start adding objects, start roughing in the objectives, and I was able to put together all the various pieces of the dialogue that I've written into into one document, and it's about 9 pages at the moment worth of dialogue, and there's a little middle section I still have to write, and then the ending that I still have to write. But I don't know, I feel like I've made more progress in the past week on it than I have in months, which is a great place to be at. And of course, it's sort of annoying that this downtime came right after that. So I have to sit there and just try and hold on to this feeling that, I'm doing really good on this mission.
Nice.
But, I don't know, Mike, the question I have to decide on this mission now is a very specific one, is a specific instance of whether I want to do a map transition or try and build, because what I want to do is you're going to do a forensic examination of what is essentially a crime scene almost, the scene of a battle where you had gone down and defended this Cardassian research station against Breen mercenaries. and you want to try and find out where these mercenaries came from. There's none of them left alive for you to question. So you got to gather the evidence and go back up to your ship, and your forensic specialist is going to analyze the evidence that you collected and, tell you, at least, help you narrow it down where to look for these guys. But the question is whether I put a map transition there where you go back up to the ship, or try and build a Federation interior inside of my Cardassian interior and just spawn it around you.
That sounds like it would be fun.
I've done this before. I did it. I did it for the Mirror Universe transition in my Mirror Universe episode, where I built a Federation interior inside a Klingon interior.
Oh, nice.
And then when you're ready to cross over, because I surmised that the Earth space dock in the Mirror Universe would be an old Klingon Cardassian Alliance space station built by them.
Sure.
So you start off in your universe, in the Federation interior, the custom interior that I built. Then, once you've done some modifications to the transporter pad, you step on the transporter pad, hit the controls, and the custom Fed interior disappears around you, leaving the original, baked-in Klingon interior. So I think I did it again.
People scratching their head.
It was damn complicated, I can tell you that, to build. And, I don't know, some people immediately knew what was going on when I showed it to them, and some people were like, oh man, how did you do that? It was one of the more fun things I've done, I think, even though it was complicated. But I think I can probably do it again. The question is, are the Cardassian map I want to use, are the corridors wide enough for me to build something inside it?
Which one are you talking about?
Well, the one I want to use is I can't remember exactly what it's called. It's the Cardassian Ministry of something.
Oh,
the one that's
okay, I know.
on Cardassia Prime.
They'll be
some of them
involved.
are, yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them
That's
are.
very tricky.
Mm-hmm. It might be tricky.
If I remember right, though, the Cardassian Ministry of Commerce is one of those maps that tends to have randomly placed consoles and crates.
Yeah, it's filled up with props. That's for sure.
Yeah, they're all over the place in that map.
You would have to add a bunch of stuff to hide those.
Mm-hmm.
Or, just choose which ones you don't feel like bothering with, because, let's face it, a crate with a Cardassian logo on it, who cares?
So, if necessary, could you superimpose or flip it around and start out with a Federation interior, and then
build a Cardassian? Because do we have Cardassian walls?
We do.
We do.
We have Cardassian walls and doors.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
And some platforms, arches. I think we've got all the.
We got the building blocks. Yeah, I certainly could do that, because there's some Federation interiors that would be easily usable for that.
Because you could even use something like Earth Space Dock, which has a lot of closed-in but also open areas. Mm-hmm. And then there's always the possibility that you could do both as custom, and then just swap between them.
Mm-hmm. Certainly could.
Well, there's one thing I was thinking about when you were talking about this was the possibility of using Terok Nor instead of the Ministry of Justice.
Terok Nor might have better hallways for that sort of thing.
What I was thinking of with Terok Nor, though, is that Terok Nor also has a bunch of really big, wide open rooms. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have a few small tables, a few other small props here and there, but not a lot.
Because, of course, the thing when you're doing something like this, when you're building a map inside another map, is that the map that you build is going to be smaller. It has to be smaller than the original map.
Yeah.
So you got to find a map that has wide enough areas that the map that you build inside it isn't going to be so small that it just constricts the player.
Yeah, I've worked a lot with the Terok Nor map, because one of my missions that kind of got stuck in development purgatory has that as being used for an alien space station. I mean, because Terok Nor has rather wide open hallways that you could relatively easily redress, and most parts of the hallways don't have a lot of stuff in them. There are certain locations where there's these huge stacks of crates, but if you're redressing it, you could just put a wall there and completely
put
hide
something
the
over it to
existence
hide it.
of the crate.
And that's definitely something I had to do when I've done this before is, put things around to hide stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And of course it was even worse back when I built that because, back then you could not disappear NPCs. So I had to find ways to hide the NPCs from the original map.
Well, part of the reason why I like the Terok Nor set, though, is that it's actually a 2-level map where there's a bottom floor and a top floor, and there's several different ramps that you can walk up to get to the top floor and go down to get to the bottom floor. Which, actually, now that I think about it, if you go from one end of the map to the other, you have to go to the top floor because the stacks of crates in the hallway block certain sections of the bottom floor, so you can't just walk through the bottom. Oh, well.
Well, I'll take a look at that, but, the reason I picked the Cardassian Ministry one is because it's a ground map. I mean, it's an actual thing that's on the ground and it has windows.
Ah, I see. That's,
because the installation that you go to is on a planet. It may not matter so much.
Terok
Ministry Interior doesn't have windows, does it?
Space station,
I think it has
and you have.
It doesn't.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I know Terok Nor has windows that look out, and so you can look at the stars and whatnot. And those would look kind of off on a ground map.
Yeah, but you could swap out the
I know
background.
there's some backdrops that are like clouds, interior backdrops.
There are.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to be using.
There are a bunch of other Cardassian sort of interiors too. That possibly could work. That my mind is telling me that I've tried to use a couple that have that definitely have windows to the outside, like you're talking about there too.
And if I wanted to turn it around, I mean, you're right. I could use the Earth space dock because it has those huge windows. I could build a Cardassian part of the map so it butted up against those windows.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you transition over to the Fed side of the map, I could cover up those windows.
When I was first building Midas Part 1, I was building it on the Warwick interior, and I actually intended to have windows looking out because there was some rock mushroom looking things that I was going to stick outside so that you could kind of make it look like you were looking out into the city beyond. And unfortunately I had to drop it because there just wasn't enough space between the window and the edge of the map to really put in a false backdrop.
This is true. I experienced that on another one. I was doing a custom build for a Klingon bridge, and I wanted to put, because on ground maps you can put a comet. There's a comet asset. And I wanted to put that outside the view screen, but there wasn't enough room how I built it.
One thing I've noticed with that comet asset is that it adds a really neat visual effect if you rotate it so that the tail of the comet passes through one of the sections of the map that people walk in. It adds this effect to the map of like a smoky haze sort of, that it isn't just sitting stagnant and slowly walking around. It's actually, moving in a direction.
Huh. I would never even think of using that for anything.
Yeah.
So we learned something today. So just check it out, everybody. The tail of the comet on ground maps.
I actually did that in my mission, the Beta Rana incident. I noticed that while I was playing around and tinkering with things, and I decided it was cool, so I made up some dialogue to explain why these clouds were blowing through the station. If I remember right, my explanation was that the damage to the space station had caused a leak in the coolant for the life support, but the coolant, while somewhat toxic to most people, was something that the people living on the space station could breathe safely, so they didn't really care about them. It was on their we'll get around to fixing this eventually list.
Well, Hippie, I know you've had a crazy week, but have you done any work on Foundry-related stuff?
I actually have. My week was going, really only got crazy fairly recently, but that's beside the point. like you, over the weekend, knowing that that Legacy of Romulus was going to launch Tuesday, and that was the day I would be traveling. I wasn't going to be able to even look at Legacy of Romulus or play the game till probably Saturday or even Sunday next weekend. But what I managed to do over the weekend was get a lot of time in the Foundry editor and put some of the not final touches, because WoW building colonies it's hard, but it's fun. And I spent a lot of time building a colony map, and I built it on a map that I found. There's a colony map that the only problem with it is that the map is full of Cardassian crates all over the place. They're stacked against walls everywhere. And I'm setting this colony just on the edge of Klingon space. It makes no sense for there to be Cardassian crates stacked against every building. Now, most of the action on the map takes place far enough away that it's not really going to be an issue, except for people like me who will run around and look at everything on the map that I let you run around to. So what I'm doing is, at least with the ones that are close to where the action is happening, because I'm building where all of the buildings are on the colony map that exist. It's kind of where the native race of the planet exists, and there's kind of a second-class citizen colony of refugees, multicultural, multiracial, where some of them are Romulans. And at some point during the mission, the players are going to end up at this colony. Most of the action that's going to take place there is going to take place at the refugee camp, not in the colony where the buildings are and such. But I'm going to go ahead, and what I've done is I've taken the time to grab the Klingon crate details and use them to cover up those Cardassian crates. And the difficulty that I'm finding, or that I found while I was doing it, is that where those crates are, they're often buried underneath, not buried, but they're often hidden just underneath the lip of where a roof comes out over a building, over the ground of a building. And so when you're looking at the 2D map, you don't see where that is. So it was a lot of opening up the map, making sure things were lined up properly, going back into the editor, moving them, a little bit on the Y coordinate, a little bit on the X and the Z, and it was just a process, but it was really actually kind of fun, and the colony looks very nice. So I spent a lot of time doing that.
Be made easier if you had that nifty little ability to move some things around in the preview.
3D editor where I could grab one item at a time and move it. Yeah, I don't know where I've ever heard of a game that might have that.
That's crazy talk. It can't be done.
It's impossible.
It's crazy talk. It's impossible. Yeah, that's what I got accomplished this weekend, and I actually put a lot of the dialogue into the mission too as I was doing it. Like the reason that map got built was I'm building this mission because of the way that it occurred in my mind. I'm building it from through the story tab. So as I reached the map of the colony, that's when the colony started getting built, kind of thing. So that's where I was.
All the way around. I always build from the visual, so the maps will almost always kind of fill out my story.
Yeah, I mean, the story on this one is I told you guys, where it ends. I built it from that J. Michael Straczynski school of storytelling, of knowing what that powerful last couple of moments is going to be, and then making sure that you kind of are serving building to that point as much as you can. That's kind of where I went with this one. So,
excellent. Let's move on to mission reviews, and I will start because I have two.
Excellent. I have none. So,
lazy bum. We haven't had a good hippie review in a while.
You'll get one.
You should get on that.
You'll get one next week.
Excellent. Well, let's see. The first one I played is I went and played one of the Spotlight missions from a few weeks back called Repairing Utopia Planitia. And the thing I wanted to compliment this guy on is his space map, which I think really looked very good and very reminiscent. I'm sure he was going for this. Very reminiscent of the Voyager episode where you see the Utopia Planitia shipyards, and it's just this huge complex of space docks. I thought he really captured that well. With the assets that we have, which of course are not the exact assets that you might need. The plot was fairly simple. There had been a recent Klingon raid on the shipyards. You go through the area and make sure everything's secure, which of course it isn't. And you have to fight off some more Klingons. And repair some things. And I thought, it's not a huge mission. It's not, an epic 3-hour slog through anything. It's not, the greatest plot you've ever played or anything like that, but it doesn't have to be. It was fun. I enjoyed my time in it. And I compliment the author on that. Because really that's what you want in a Spotlight mission. It doesn't have to be the greatest mission ever, but it has to be good. And you have to enjoy your time in it. The other mission I want to talk about is called Inner Space by R.S. or R. Smudger, I think is what I'm going to call him, R. Smudger. Yeah. And
sorry if that's not your.
Sorry if that's not how you pronounce it, but that's how you spelled it. R. Smudger.
But it's how you'll be known from now on.
It's how you'll be known from now on. I have coined your name. This is one of the ones that is built for Foundry Challenge number 7, which is, of course, the Shuttlecraft Challenge. So I climbed into my runabout and played this one. What this is definitely a touchstone mission, which, of course, we talked about before. In this case, touching back to a original series episode. So, of course, Hippie, you would really like this one.
Awesome.
And I wanted to talk about mostly his combat balance with shuttles, which is a very, very difficult thing to do, as Kirk Fat could tell us. Kirk Fat, of course, built this mission that takes place almost entirely inside of Borg Cube. This is, weeks back. This isn't for this challenge. And he had such trouble with combat balance because, anything, no matter what he put in the map, it would just kick his butt. And then, of course, I played it for him and didn't have any trouble at all. So I think combat balance for shuttles is very, very difficult. You have to use weak mobs, you have to use fighters, and reskin them as different things. But I think this guy accomplished it very well. Go ahead.
One thing I was just thinking about while you were saying with the fighter tactics and all that stuff is, I remember my many trips to the Idrin system. I remember what I did to the stuff that lives there. Let's just say that I didn't die in the Idrin system more than once or twice, and that was only in my first 2 or 3 trips there before I'd figured out the best way to get rid of the stupid things that lived there. The phaser point defense.
Oh, the little swarmers?
Swarmers. The best way I found out of that is to essentially die and have my explosion kill them.
Well, see, I actually have 3 things that I like to do to Idrin swarmers and anything else in fighter-based missions that is horribly unfair to do to NPCs in fighter-based missions because it's, overkill, more or less. Correction, 4. One of them is, of course, the phaser point defense console or the disruptor point defense console, whichever one you're using, because it's basically an I win button. You turn it on, and everything that's a fighter or frigate within a few kilometers of you dies. I mean, everything.
Until the second wave comes.
Yeah, but you still have the ability to fight the second wave. You don't have to rely on just that. Anyway, so the second one is to use torpedo spread, especially with something that you can, fire repeatedly. Hard pings, because of the fact that they do splash damage when they hit, and they release that shockwave afterwards that does damage to other nearby enemies. Those are ridiculously powerful in fighter missions as well.
There's also that console that sends out a pulse that jumps from ship to ship. I can't remember what the name of that is.
Isometric charge.
That's it. Isometric charge.
I'd forgotten about that one, but that would make number 5 on my list.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4.
Plasma weapons as well, or plasma torpedoes.
It's totally a steal of the chain reaction pulsar weapon.
Well, see, number 4 on my list is the Nadian detonator. It's the one where you turn it on, and the next time you fire a torpedo, the torpedo does a photonic shockwave effect when it hits the target. Those, they don't necessarily kill things like Idrin swarmers and fighters immediately, but it does a lot more damage than to them than it does to actual ships. Anyway, though, one thing I realized after doing the mission in the Idrin system is that using 2 or 3 of those things on each of my vessels made the mission ridiculously easy compared to not using stuff like that. And getting back to the game balance thing is that honestly, when writing a Foundry mission for the general balance, I would test it and maybe use 1 of those 4 things, or 5 things rather,
Yeah,
and
not
not all of them. Because
you can't assume that the player has
most
those.
people probably...
You have to sort of play to the lowest common denominator if you care about such things. If you care about not making it too hard. Now I think in Inner Space, I think our Smudger did a pretty good job of combat balance, because I remember going into the final fight, which he has a couple allies helping you, and thinking, oh my god, how am I going to survive this? And I did, but just barely. And that to me is a good fight, is if I survive, but just barely, that makes it a good fight because I had to work for it. But I still accomplished it.
Right on.
And I'm not exactly sure what kind of mobs he used. So I'd have to play it again and pay a little bit more attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of the mission was pretty good. Like I said, I think if you're a TOS fan, I think you will like it.
I'll have to check this
it
out.
touchdowns back to, and I don't want to spoil it by giving away the episode, but definitely, and puts a new twist on it. So, those are my reviews. Anybody else got one to talk about? Okay.
Foundry's down.
I'm not sure if we'll...
about discussing that one mission by Lincoln in Space.
Yeah. Go for it.
It already got discussed tonight, but I didn't, put in my own twist.
Did you have anything that you didn't think was mentioned?
Well, I have to say, I actually like the basic premise of his mission. He did several extremely creative things that you don't normally see in Foundry missions because, well, some of the things that he did in his mission are things that Cryptic very rarely does in their missions. I mean, like the thing where you have 2 ways of getting from point A to point B, one of which requires impressive jumping skills.
Mm-hmm.
The other, well, not that impressive if you're Cation. If you're Cation, it's ridiculously easy. If you're not a Cation, then it requires impressive skill. Actually, I did it as a liberated Borg, so, Anyway, he actually did have one of the fights where he spawned an enemy mob that you weren't supposed to be able to kill. What you're supposed to do is when the fight starts, you're supposed to run away and run to a beam out point before the mob kills you. I didn't pay attention to that when I did the mission, and instead of running away, I decided that I was going to terminate them. Which, honestly, I rocket ground combat, and that's probably the only reason why I was able to actually do it. Then I looked at the quest objective, and I'm like, oh, I wasn't supposed to go through all that effort. Oh well. I have to say, it was a lot of fun. He did a lot of things in the mission that you don't often see people do. It was a bit, I guess you could say rough, but overall it was actually
that's his
good.
first mission, if I'm not mistaken.
It is. It's his first mission.
And I know because he's a regular forum poster, so I know he's been working on it for a long, long, long time. Which is a lot more work than people usually put into their first mission.
I mean, I figure he's probably read several of the tutorials on building maps, because one of the things that he did was a custom interior map that, well, it had a few, I guess you could say, rough edges, but it certainly wasn't poorly done. There's this one corner where if you look closely, you'll notice that there's this giant crack in the floor, that when you walk over it, you don't actually fall through it because the game engine doesn't ever decide you're, standing above nothing. You're either standing above the piece to the left, the piece to the right. But if you look at it, it looks like there's a hole that you could probably fall through. Another one is there were a few places where he put freestanding one-sided props so that when you walk through the mission and you look at a few of the things that he has in there, they don't look right when you look at them from certain angles.
Yeah, you got to be careful of that.
There's definitely a lot of those props.
One-sided props have their uses, but in some cases they're annoying. Anyway, I don't really.
It's a pretty common the first time to start.
Holodeck arch one. Yeah. Because the one that he did is he used this holodeck arch thing as people who are visiting the space station. They walk through the arch for a security scan, and he placed the arches without noticing that they were a one-sided prop. So when you walk through them, you can see through the frame of the arch, and
Yeah, that's backface calling.
Yep.
But aside from minor things like that, it was a pretty good mission. And, I would definitely recommend playing it just because he had a cool story that he wrote into it.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. There's a really cool escape scene, kind of a chase scene that is done probably the best way I could imagine it being done in the Foundry, and I had a whole lot of fun with it. So
you can't have a better recommendation than that, right?
No,
I had fun with it.
That's true.
Yeah, excellent. Well, why don't we move on to discussion topics? Let's start with one that I alluded to earlier. Is I love using recurring characters. And even sometimes showing some progression in the characters or showing mirror universe versions of those characters throughout my missions. And I know, obviously, if you play one mission, you're only going to see that person once. But if you've played some of my other missions and then you end up playing more, you will notice them. And if you recognize them, that's just a cool little thing for people. So I don't know. What do you guys think about using recurring characters?
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it's great. You do have to be careful to do it in such a way that you don't bank on the player knowing who the character is.
Right.
But, other than that, sure,
yes, definitely
go fall for it.
Yeah, you have to have some sort of dialogue that says something like, if they say, "Oh, hello again," you have to have a little button that says, "Have we met?" ?
Right.
And, or I say, "Sorry, you must be confusing me with somebody else," or something to acknowledge the fact that they may not have met this person before.
Right.
And of course,
I think.
Go ahead.
I think what I like about it is it's kind of like it's an Easter egg for people who take the time to play a bunch of your missions, and it's a nice touch kind of thing, I think. In some cases too, the way that we've talked before about how to inject Section 31 into a story. You're going to have the same character. They might not always look the same, but if you're trying to inject them into a story silently in positions that the player might not see, that's a good way to do it.
Well, I'll tell you an example of one that I did. In my 5-part series that I built so long ago and is not published at the moment, the guy that you've been interacting with all on, the admiral that's been giving you orders, he ends up resigning at the end. And then turn it around, and in my Klingon Spotlight mission, Rack to Gino in a Jar, he is one of the people in the bar, in civilian clothing. He's one of the people he's talking to a Cardassian. And then he's one of the people that is at your trial when you're accused of murder. He's one of the people that you can solicit bribe money from.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. So, that's a fun little thing, and I have no idea if anyone's ever noticed it, but it's fun for me, I think. And
isn't that part of it? I
Absolutely.
mean, you're the author. It should be fun for you. So.
And I like seeing where these people are in their lives. Obviously, this guy has left Starfleet. He's in this, independent trading station near Klingon space, talking to some random Cardassian. And actually, I even put him in that big marketplace in my last the Tholian contest entry. He's there buying something.
Awesome.
So, and I do plan to bring him back into the fold as a major character in missions down the line. But I think in this, I kind of take my cue from the TV shows. Is that some of my favorite things in TV shows are recurring characters and bringing characters back, like Q. Everybody loves Q.
Right.
And he's so different from the pilot to the final episode of TNG. He's so different. And I love character development. And I like seeing that in minor characters. And because a lot of Star Trek was so episodic, you only had a few of those around.
Right.
Like you had Q, you had Sela, you had Gowron, but it wasn't the norm necessarily. When you get to more serialized shows like, I don't know, Battlestar Galactica, the rebooted Battlestar Galactica had so many awesome secondary characters that were there throughout the entire show's run.
Oh, well, I mean, DS9.
Until they got killed.
Yeah,
Deep Space Nine was definitely better than that.
That reminds me of something. How many different seasons of Star Trek did Jonathan Frakes appear in?
One of Voyager, one of Deep Space Nine, all 7 of...
one of Enterprise.
One of Enterprise and all 7 of TNG.
Yeah, exactly. He was a main character in The Next Generation, but he was like a sporadically recurring character in the series that were filmed after The Next Generation was over.
Yeah.
And even Worf became a recurring character essentially in the Next Generation films. He was no longer a part of the crew. He just happened to be around for every mission.
I was gonna say, is it reoccurring if he's in all of them?
That's just a coincidence.
Well, you know what? It's not recurring because he's listed, one way to look at it, he's listed in the main cast.
This is true.
Yeah.
Of every film.
Recurring, he can't be listed in the main.
It's different, I think, in that case because of the fact that Worf in that one more or less fills the same role that Decker had in the first Star Trek movie because he's not one of the main... Well, he left the Enterprise crew and he came back for some other reason.
But it just keeps getting more, like, they just keep having to find a reason to bring him back each and every movie as you watch it go along. Because he left for Deep Space Nine, and, with First Contact, he's in the Defiant when the Enterprise shows up to rescue the crew of the Defiant, and then he just
Insurrection, he just happens to be there. That's Insurrection's probably the weakest one. I mean, I get Nemesis because he's there for the wedding, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
Insurrection's the weakest one.
Insurrection is terribly weak, but it's just finding an excuse to bring Michael Dorn back.
But of course, it wouldn't be TNG without Michael Dorn. So
right, and I'm glad they found an excuse, and I'll accept the weak excuse, even though really that's my least favorite of them. But
well, if they make another movie, they're set in that era, which they probably won't since they're doing the new timeline movies, but they would probably, I would like for them to show the Titan, because, that's at the end of the last movie in the TNG movies, we find out that Riker has finally decided to let go of his dream of being the captain of Enterprise and has accepted position as the captain of this ship called the Titan.
Yeah.
Which of course is a Luna class ship, which was a fan design for the cover of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And has made it
in the
into
movie, we don't get anything besides the name.
No, we just get the name.
Just so you know, showing the Titan would have been in my Enterprise finale rewrite.
Yeah.
Set it on the Titan. So
that would have been awesome.
That would have been cool.
If they had actually set
instead of
on the USS
weirdly during that Enterprise D mission.
Yeah, because then you'd have the excuse to still use Troy and Riker. Throw in Daniels just to have a medium by which they get back, and you could have done something really fun.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of what ifs that go along with that Enterprise finale.
Yeah, unfortunately,
What if said
they
it
didn't
would have been
time.
better if. There's lots of that.
Well, the books that they did following up to that, they go with the idea that the one guy was just playing dead so that somebody or other would do something or other. I forget exactly what, but because I think it was Trip. He's apparently dead, but when you see them wheeling him into the morgue, you see him wink at them as he's being stuck on the slab like a corpse, which is one of those things where it's obviously something that the producers intended to be there, but they didn't explain in the episode why.
Here's what I think happens.
So it's a fake.
Is the last scene of the Enterprise finale takes place at the signing of the Federation Charter, but we also happen to know that earlier version of Captain Archer is up in the balcony watching that very incident. So I bet you Captain Archer got a message to himself.
There you go.
There you go. Good answer.
Well,
more time travel antics.
No. It was Daniels showing Archer the signing. So it's possible that Archer wasn't there in person and that Daniels was doing a holographic recreation using his temporal observatory.
Just blow a hole in my idea.
Sure.
All right, well, moving on, who's got another discussion topic for us?
I got one for you.
Okay.
Awesome.
So, as we have discussed verbatim in the last few episodes about all the features that we would love to see from Neverwinter come over to Stowe,
Right.
I think it can be said that there are probably some features that we would love to see make it into the Stowe Foundry that are not in Neverwinter.
Okay.
And I kind of wanted to
example.
open. So an example would be the ability to control the beam in out animations.
And add to that warp in and out animations.
Sure.
Because, I mean, there's sometimes where you're going from space map to space map where you don't necessarily want a warp out animation. I can think of one from one of my own missions. Go ahead.
The transition animation thing, yeah. That would be really, really nice because there are a whole lot of workarounds that people do trying to add transition animations that usually work. And then, of course, there's the fact that there's a whole lot of things that you could do with actual transition animations that would be really, really cool. Because when you go through the cryptic missions, they actually do have a variety of transition animation in the official cryptic missions themselves. I mean, one good example is yesterday's Enterprise. One of your map transition animations is your ship flying up to this temporal anomaly and scanning it. That's used as the map transition animation instead of jumping the warp.
Temporal ambassador, you mean?
Yeah, that one. Whatever.
Well, I can think of an example from my own mission where that would be really helpful is that I built one where you engage some ships in space in orbit of a gas giant and then you go down into the atmosphere is the next map. But of course, the way the Foundry works, you have to warp out to get to the atmosphere of the planet that's, just a few hundred kilometers below you. So
yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
That would be very helpful to have something to do a different kind of transition, whether it's just fade to black even is fine. I'll tell you a feature that I'd like to have in the Foundry that I do not believe is in the Neverwinter Foundry is the ability to put up the big mission title when you warp into the first system, or
that would be nice.
Into the first map like Cryptic can do in their maps.
That'd be really cool. I like that. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Especially in that nice original series font that they got it in.
Yeah.
I think that's very cool. Another one might be, I had it and I lost it.
While you're thinking about that one, may I suggest a
Yes,
cutscene tool?
Well, yep, cutscene tool is something that has been talked about by devs even. As a possibility. And I don't know how realistic a possibility it is. But I'd love to have it.
One thing I've noticed about the way cutscenes work in the actual game is that there are certain aspects of cutscenes that, I guess one way to put it would be cutscenes are basically the camera moves around so you see a variety of different points of view maybe, but also the things in the picture are kind of like playing out a script, almost like the way that control functionality works.
Yeah, you would have to set, where people would walk, and dialogue bubbles.
Yeah. Yeah, well, one of my favorite things about the that cutscene that Federation and Klingon players get when they go beam down to Mol Rihan the first time is when you're watching the cutscene, your character and the NPCs have predetermined locations. But if you pay attention, you'll notice that there's like maybe as many as a dozen player characters and bridge officers running around either in the background or the foreground doing whatever the heck they feel like doing while you're doing the cutscene. And you can see them moving around and doing things.
Makes it feel populated and lived in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that thinks that I don't know if we really want the cutscene tool as much as we think we do.
Well, I mean, Encryptic though has also held up the cutscene tool as an ultimate replacement to the aging demo record.
Broken demo.
Well, it's not just aging and broken. I mean, Dan in his big interview with, not big interview, but his interview with Primetime, he basically said that they don't support demo record, that it was never intended.
Depreciated.
Yeah, that it was never intended, and so it's not supported anymore.
Yeah, that's just how it goes. The one that I was thinking of was to get the little pop-up dialogues that come up without buttons that just fly up and then fade away after a while. I would like to have those because, as far as I know, I don't think they break cloak. That's one of the things. And there's sometimes where it's just, you'd want somebody to shout something at your character without needing to have a button to reply, without needing the full dialogue screen.
Mm-hmm.
It's just another tool to help us tell stories.
Right.
So what about the ability to skin NPCs or bridge officers, NPCs as bridge officers?
Mm-hmm. Or the player character.
Yes.
This is, an option that's...
Or, choosing the number of people in your away team.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big one that we've asked for forever. Since the beginning of the Foundry, essentially.
Yeah.
Or shuttle maps, for that matter.
Things to require an environmental suit for a map.
True. So that one would be tricky.
Well, we don't necessarily care how tricky it is to implement, do we?
Basically,
the Cryptic has to care about that.
We would need something to say that you can't or spawn in a environmental.
And you would need something probably at the beginning of the mission where it tells the player that they, it won't allow the player to start it unless they're wearing one.
Right.
To avoid getting, endlessly stuck in a round of dying or something like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because, they do have to think about when they implement these things, they have to think about the effects of what they're implementing, about ways it could be abused, ways it could be used incorrectly to make a mission broken, things like that.
Or basically tie up the player.
Yeah, you don't want that. But we don't have to worry about this. We just suggest stuff. They can figure out the hard part.
I'd love to see a rewards table that authors could use. If they're determining, X amount of time, or X amount of dilithium for this amount of time, etc., and missions have obviously an average time that's determined. I'd like to see a rewards table where the author could choose out of these 5 weapons of the appropriate mark, and maybe that, or dilithium, or fleet marks, or something, so that depending on the sort of mission that the author has decided to tell, he can say, this is the reward, or this is the individualized reward for this mission, kind of thing.
Well, one of the things I noticed that Neverwinter has that Star Trek Online doesn't currently do for Foundry missions, that it kind of sort of used to do, is how that you get, as part of the mission completion, a random item. Now, the old Foundry wrapper back a long time ago that a lot of the people currently playing the game didn't start playing until after they changed this feature, was one of the things that it used to do is that the Foundry wrapper would give you a random level-specific item. However, when they did the marks of who cares what to dilithium conversion, the Foundry wrapper got changed so that you could choose to get either the item or dilithium. Then eventually they dropped the item and stuck in fleet marks, and then yada yada yada.
I think the reason is because they didn't code in a very attractive item drop.
Yeah, I think they were blue mark 10s or something like that.
Yeah, it comes down to, we're dealing with a game that, now we're seeing some new players again. We're going to have, some low-level tunes running around, which is going to be awesome. People are going to be making up new tunes. There'll be some low-level things happening in the game again, but the thing is, in a month, in 2 months, we're going to have all level 50s again, and Mark 10 blue items it's not even vendor trash. That's replicator trash. So,
are you kidding? I sell...
Here's the thing, though, is that it did not always give you blue items. It did. Sometimes it would give you purple items. And one of my characters, I have this Mark II shield generator console that he is currently keeping in his bank as a souvenir because he got it from the Foundry wrapper back a long time ago. And it's a Mark II purple console. It's just one of those weird things that you don't see all that often. Anyway, that's one thing I remember about that, is that it actually did have a decent chance of giving you purples, even if it didn't always do it. But, it was a completely random item. You never knew if it was going to be a ship weapon, a personal shield, or a console. No clue what it was.
I don't know that I ever saw a purple item in the entire time that wrapper was in effect. So you had a very different experience with it than I did. I always saw useless blue items.
So I
did get a lot of useless items from it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it that I don't think we will ever see any control over rewards.
Yeah. Oh well.
But we've definitely given you the answer to your question, is that there are many things that are not in the Neverwinter Foundry that we do want for our Foundry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not me who really needs to know that. Cryptic.
It's cryptic.
Well, I've got something that's not in the Neverwinter Foundry that I would love to see in the Stowe Foundry, in the STO Foundry. A spell check. A spelling and grammar check.
That's okay. I think the devs want that feature too.
I think they do as well.
I'm pretty sure that Kestrel actually is on record as saying she wants a spell check for her tools.
Yeah. I remember playing through the Legacy of Romulus Vengeance stuff when it first came out for the closed beta, and I can easily understand why Kestrel would want to have a spell check built into the tools she makes for writing missions.
I just thought of another thing that's not in Neverwinter that we've heard Kestrel talk about that she recently got, was the ability to come up with dialogue and put dialogue into places for different races. I'd like to see that in our Foundry as well.
If you play through the missions involving the fight between the Remans and the Tal Shiar, it's the old Cloaked Intention story arc, but they actually now have several things where there are special dialogue choices that will only appear if you're playing as a Romulan character.
That's very cool.
And obviously we would love to have that.
Yeah. I would really love to have the ability to put dialogue options in specifically based on a player character's race. Absolutely.
Ooh, here's another feature, is the ability to have the player play in a ship other than theirs.
Yeah.
That would be definitely excellent.
Like they do both the Federation and the Klingon, and I don't know if anywhere in the Romulan story yet does it, but both the
Templar
Klingon...
Ambassador for all three.
Actually,
for all
yes.
three, yeah.
In one of the Romulan stories, you fly an Alachi ship.
There you go.
Spoilers. Spoilers.
So by the way, once again, there be spoilers here.
There be spoilers.
We should
Sorry.
just put that on the
They're going
start.
to
of-
leak.
Don't use the E word. No Alachi allowed here. Well, within a few weeks, nobody will care.
Yeah. No, nobody.
Actually, honestly, there's probably a lot of people that already don't care. So, tell us.
And some people are just not bothered by spoilers. I'm one of them. I'm not bothered at all by spoilers.
Oh, well then in Star Trek Into Darkness, the villain is.
I've seen it, so
You've
So I
seen
know.
it at this point.
yes. So I know.
I have
Anyway,
to say, I like the way that they wrote the new Romulan stuff, because there are actually a lot of things that you get as quest rewards in the new Romulus storyline that they've never done as quest rewards for storyline missions ever before in the entire game.
Such as,
This is going to be incredibly spoiler filled. So,
Okay, well,
Spoilers.
okay, in one of the missions, you get 3 random common duty officers as part of a regular storyline mission.
well, yeah, I
You
think
actually
they've
get duty
I think they've
officers.
added that into the game as rewards now. I've started getting that in the Nimbus story as well. That's rewards that they have for missions there. They'll give you fleet duty officer boxes of varying rarities depending on the missions that you do. So I think they've just added duty officer boxes and duty officers in general as
Well, 'cause
rewards.
these are
into
some
the
of the
game.
first missions that have really been made after the duty officer system's been
True.
introduced.
Yeah. Another one is that you will get costume unlock options for certain missions.
Yeah, story based costume
Yeah.
unlocks.
Yeah,
Ones that you will essentially
which
need
is
to
something they've never
for the
done
story.
before at all.
even though you don't really need to put them on. It's just sort of a cool RP thing.
Yeah.
Which is a totally nice touch.
Yeah,
I'll
I like it.
That's an awesome touch, yeah.
And also, sort of a reach out from Cryptic to the people who really wanted those costumes.
Right.
Now I wish they handed out TOS uniforms for everything old is new.
Yeah, no, sorry about that.
You can dream.
Another interesting one is
I like
that
that. We can dream.
at the same time that you get the costume unlock, you get the ability to rename your Romulan Republic ships to add the IRW prefix instead of the RRW prefix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can, there's a way you can go full on Romulan Star Empire player if you wanted, which is,
Well,
get
you
a
can make
warbird.
yourself look like it.
Yeah, you can make yourself look like one. You can put IRW in front of your warbird's name and build a Foundry mission where you're a member of the Tal Shiar or the Star Empire military or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Do it.
Well, also, considering that these are Romulans we're talking about, you could just, more or less pretend that your character is a deep cover operative, and, you're just pretending to play along with what the Romulan Republic wants you to do.
You're an
Or what have
infiltrator.
you. Another thing, though, is that there's also one point where you get an emote, it's a fake emote. You actually get that from doing one of the story missions.
This is like
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
they've added a new dance emote to the
The thing
game.
is, though, it's not
Van
an
Dance.
actual
Yeah.
mission. It's not an actual mission reward. At one point in the mission,
That's an
you
accolade.
get an accolade for completing a certain part of the mission, and then the accolade gives you the emote. But it's it's something that you will automatically get as part of the mission. It's not one of the things we have to do like a hidden side quest or something. It's just part of the mission.
And I think that's something that grew out of a conversation down in the Tribble forums where people had requested that emote be added into the game.
They did, yes.
And then, of course, people were joking around suggesting, equivalent emotes that could be added for the KDF and the Federation side. And one of them was the crazy Gowron eyes.
Crazy Gowron
eyes. and I've heard from people who've been to conventions and they say that the actors can do the crazy eyes just as easily without the makeup.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's just how he is. And I can't remember. I had suggested one for the Federation. I cannot remember for the life of me what it was. There's something really funny though.
They'll be installed on Tuesday.
or the goofy grin that Cisco got after he punched Q in the face.
Yeah.
With a little line that says, "I am not."
Yeah, that was interesting.
So, Hippie, have you got a topic for us?
A topic for us. I want to go back to the topic that we were talking about, which is difficult topics in the Foundry, because I touched on something that we talked a lot about how to cover, a difficult, say if it's a political topic or something like that, but storytelling can often, like what I mentioned was that it can often trigger things in people. You tell a storytelling, about, you tell a story that has something to do with terrorists, and someone who's had that, who's had terrorism affect their lives can be triggered, and the story, sets off things for them. How do you walk that line, I guess, is a topic that has come up in my mind, not just necessarily in Foundry storytelling, but in storytelling in other parts of my life as well. So I'd love to talk about that.
That's something that came up on the forums, because of course in the Legacy of Romulus, your character is several times called a terrorist because of course the Romulan Empire views Detan's movement as terrorists, and I would argue that is an incorrect label, but
right.
Well,
but it's a matter of perspective.
It is actually a commentary on a real life thing, and basically we've had in recent history a number of rebellions form up in certain Middle Eastern countries.
Well, there's this old saying that goes, "One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter."
Right.
I mean, it doesn't hold true for all terrorists, but
it's because it's all a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
There's people that our country is labeled as terrorists. I mean, our country, I say, because the four of us were all Americans, that, not everybody would call terrorists.
Right.
And this, it did trigger something in somebody on the forums who got very, very offended by their player character being called a terrorist. Because they had a personal experience with that.
Mm-hmm.
With terrorism. And I think it's a very difficult thing. And I can only say that, I don't want to sound insensitive, but it's very hard to write for. And you almost have to not worry about it.
Okay, that's...
I wouldn't say don't worry about it, but I would say, approach it sensitively. I mean, I'm not saying don't do it, but don't be gentle.
Yeah, be gentle. Maybe not glorify things that, that this might, that people might take this way.
I think, my biggest concern, following this conversation was that someone would approach a difficult subject without the reverence such a subject requires.
That's, I think, what it really is I feel like I'm almost of the opinion, once upon a time when I was, just a little kid, I heard George Carlin make a joke, and he said something to the effect that nothing is off limits. And he made a bunch of jokes about things that really I would have considered off limits, but it was the way that he approached it and then I actually, at a later point in life, when I was working in theater, had a chance to actually meet George Carlin, and he talked to a bunch of us that had done the stage crew for that performance, and talked about what it really was that exactly what you just said. You have to have some kind of a reverence and a respect for what someone might have gone through when you're talking about these things, and as long as you do that, it's not that nothing is off limits, but it's certain approaches to things are off limits, but
don't, I guess, approach it in a very frank manner. You don't necessarily have to sugarcoat everything, but, show the different sides of things and be very fair. I would say.
Yeah, it's definitely not something that you can go into with any emotion or
Right.
with, I mean, if it's something that you're going after because you're angry about something or, something that you just, I'm not even sure how best to
It's a
describe it.
difficult subject to even
discuss.
articulate.
Yeah, to even
To
like,
articulate how you do
But-
this. I mean, it's very difficult to describe how.
But you have to take a step back and approach it from a much more objective view than a lot of people normally would.
And the
think
bottom
that's
line
true,
is you
yeah.
may not be able to thread that needle. You may
Yeah,
not
that
be
is-
able to get it to where everybody who plays it would be still happy with how
Yeah, I mean-
it's portrayed.
And every time you tackle
Mhm.
such a subject, you are running a risk.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things that you have to accept it and treat it with the respect that it deserves.
hmm
But
Yeah,
at the end of the day,
there's-
even if
there's-
somebody's not happy with it, sometimes that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
I forget who said it, but someone once said something to the effect of sacred cows exist so that people can. I forget the exact thing I said. Something to the effect of kill them. That if you set up some topic as this big taboo thing that you never talk about, blah blah blah, that only lasts until someone who doesn't know that you have decided that topic shouldn't be discussed decides to talk to you about it.
God, I like that.
And we all have our axes to grind, and the things that might offend me are very, very different from the things that might offend the four of you or the three.
Right.
Of you. But as you're writing that, you can't know what's going to affect your audience and what's going to affect each individual member of your audience. There's no way to know that for sure, which is what makes this such a difficult topic.
Yeah, and it's such a sensitive thing that there is not a definitive right answer.
Right.
It's almost very subjective.
But I think we touched on some good things.
Yeah.
I think we touched on some good things. I mean, it certainly helped inform some of what I've been having, to think about in terms of storytelling. So.
Well, and from my own experiences in thinking about some difficult topics for some upcoming Foundry missions, which is, essentially terrorism, which we alluded to, terrorism and torture even. And my choice would be to not glorify them, to not present them,
Right.
to not present them as good, for sure. And in some ways not present them as evil, just present them as things that are going on. Let the player decide
Yeah.
whether those were good or evil. And
Yeah, I mean,
so don't, I guess my advice in that sense would be don't dictate to people what these things are, how they should feel about them.
and I think in the shows a lot of times it was not about getting someone to decide this is right or wrong. It's about getting them to be thinking about whether it's right or wrong.
Absolutely. Which is usually how Picard's speech ended up at the end.
Yeah.
Was getting people to think about whether they're right or wrong.
Well, one thing that I've attempted to do in some stories that I've written, well, they weren't things I did for the Foundry. They were things that I did for like general, regular written out works of fiction. Is trying to write characters and events from a morally neutral perspective is a lot harder than you would think, because the fact that you can't label the characters as good guys or bad guys. It's not quite that cut and dry. If you're, I've noticed that it makes for a very different story than most story writing does.
And we know that the best Star Trek villains are the ones that you could not necessarily label as they're just the black hat.
Right.
Yeah.
to use
Right.
the old Western terms, is the black hats were the bad guys and the white hats were the good guys.
Were the
Yeah.
good guys, of course, yeah.
Twirly mustaches.
Yeah. You can hold up the great villains of Star Trek and see that they are shades of gray rather than black and white guys.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like, you have guys like Khan, who, let's face it, Khan was deranged and demented and several other things.
But he had plenty of reasons and good reasons for hating Kirk.
Plenty.
Absolutely justifiable reasons. I mean, he got marooned on a planet.
Horrible planet.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
Eventually.
that's one of those places where you leave people on the planet And it's like the old thing of leaving someone on a deserted desert island.
Mhm.
You leave them there and you don't expect them to be alive when you come back.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing that Kirk did to Khan.
Well, yeah.
It was not a terribly humane thing if you think about it.
No.
Not entirely.
No, but I mean, if you look at Deep
So-
Space Nine, though, has a number of villains that are very dynamic.
And a number of heroes who do questionable things,
Mm-hmm.
Especially the Cisco.
which I think is sort of far from maybe what Gene Roddenberry had intended, but I think makes for better storytelling.
I don't know. I think
Actually, Gene Roddenberry, his storylines often dealt with that concept very heavily. It's just
what
that
you're saying.
Yeah, I was
He
thinking the same
tended-
thing.
he tended to do it more from a white hat perspective than some of the other stories would do. But remember A Taste of Armageddon and the General Order 24? Gene Roddenberry wrote that storyline. I mean, Kirk literally ordered the crew of the Enterprise to blow the heck out of this planet if the people didn't surrender.
You're
The
right.
ultimate example, City on the Edge of Forever.
Yeah.
I mean, where basically Kirk lets a woman die in order to do the greater good. I mean, that a story like that was unheard of for the '60s.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, that's right along the same lines as the In the Pale Moonlight.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Essentially condoning murder for the greater good.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's not like Roddenberry strayed away from difficult things. I mean,
This is true, and you're absolutely right. People don't think about that a lot when they think about Gene Roddenberry. They think, fluffy white kittens in utopia, and everybody's great in the future, and humanity is perfect, and Earth is a paradise. And they
But I
don't
think-
think about the darker stories that he told.
And I think the reason they got away with that, I mean, in both cases, is that they treated it with the full weight of what it meant.
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And I think
it's
here's-
not an empty threat.
Yeah,
It's
and here's
Kirk responding in a rational way to a very clear and present danger to himself and his ship.
yeah, but it's also a perfect example of what we talked about last week, where the part of the idea of being able to tell a difficult story is tell it through the lens of science fiction, where it's not real. Because it's science fiction, it's not real to people in some way, and so you can get away with more.
Yeah. But-
Well, we got a few minutes left. Mark, do you got a topic for us?
No, not really.
Aww.
Now,
You ruined my segue.
I did a pretty good one last time, so I figure,
All right. Any closing thoughts? Anybody? Predictions? When the Foundry's going to be back up?
I think we'll at least have playability back by the end of the week.
I think we'll have playability back tomorrow.
Well, we know, of course, that there's some missions that are up.
We already have some playability back. I think we'll
Yeah.
have playability back within 2 days. I think we'll have editing back a day after that, and it may be Monday next week, that will give authors time to adjust anything that needs to be adjusted. And I'm betting Monday or Tuesday next week, we're going to have full ratings and everything back and ready to go. So that's my 10 penny
of course,
bet.
we run into any problems.
Right, unless like the republish goes terribly wrong, but it doesn't seem to be so far.
We've got enough experience with this now. I think their team has enough experience with this that it goes fairly smooth.
Not to mention, I mean, just from what I saw on Tribble, it suggested that I don't think we'll hit any major problems.
Well, okay, here's one little thing to be thinking about. This is something that I have seen Kirkfat suggest on the forums, is that, instead of systems, why don't, the next big Foundry update, because it's been hinted at that maybe they'll be spending some time on the Foundry now that Legacy of Romulus is out. The next big update, would you rather it be new systems, new stuff to play with, say, things that migrate over from Neverwinter, like, in-map teleporters, things like that? Or would you rather it be new assets, new things to place on maps, or new maps themselves?
Oh, I'd rather it be new systems.
Yeah?
I am going to argue that different people work on different things. Systems
Yeah.
are done by programmers, assets are done by artists.
Sure. And we don't know what sort of manpower would be dedicated if they did go ahead and start working on the Foundry. But I think my preference would be is to go back and add the things that should have been added to fill up that roster with the things that we always should have had, such as all those uniforms that Cryptic Frost is collecting.
Yeah.
Those costumes that should have been always in there, and obviously more New Romulus stuff is what I'd like.
So
I would
I'm going to
agree.
make the argument that I would like to see, and this is only my personal opinion. I am not speaking for anyone else on this. Is I would like to see Cryptic start moving towards the goal of getting the Stove Foundry out of beta.
Yeah.
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 I think once we can get it that
Maybe
far,
sometime
then
this year.
It'd be nice,
I don't know.
but there's a lot of connotations that go with that.
Exactly. That's why I have phrased it that
Qualifications.
particular way.
Like fixing a lot of bugs, making sure things don't crash.
But working
lot of
toward that
things.
goal sure would be nice.
That's a good goal. It's a very good goal. And I think that's a good place to end for the night. So everybody say good night.
Good night.
Good night.